Welcome to Aberdeen Baptist Church once again. Another version or round of Pastoral Thought as I deal with maybe the subject that I ponder the most. It's right up there with sovereignty versus free will, which we've already talked about, but this one is less academic, more more transitional. As you age, you seem to see things a little differently, and so it's one of these issues that you struggle with to put together the pieces in your mind for years and years, especially as you mature in the faith. You start to see yourself moving, and that's that gaining of wisdom. You can frame this topic in 100 different ways, and I can name you probably a dozen right now. You could frame it as law versus liberty. Where does your Christian liberty allow you to express yourself? Where does the law kind of restrain you? And we may say, oh, the law is for the Old Testament, but really we want to bring the law in because in our hearts we want a very definite line, a black and a white line. And so the question is, where is the line? What is allowable? What is not allowable in our lives? It's obedience versus faith. It's the flesh, but the flesh in a good place, meaning the strength of willpower, that flesh, versus the spirit. The flesh puts restraints in place. The spirit wants to achieve that which is internal. It can be framed external versus internal, because the law externally restricts behavior, but it doesn't affect the internals. And of course, the spirit affects the internals. You can call it truth versus love. And I know that sounds a little bit of a stretch, but there's this idea that at your funeral, would you rather be known as a person who was always right or always seeking truth, or a person who was known for their love? I mean, there's sometimes a truth. I mean, they're all good things, but truth can be callous when misapplied or when pushed. And so sometimes we're in a quest to be right and we trample people with it instead of being that person of grace. You can frame it as legalistic versus a liberal, and that puts the negative connotations on each side so that each one sounds bad. Rules versus standards. Rules are something you apply to everybody. Standards are something you apply to yourself. And that's where I come in. So it can be right versus wrong, and so many different areas where we can take it. But I'm going to take it as that white versus black. Where do we find, and I guess I'm going to really the law or the flesh versus the spirit. We know that the law is good. And we have laws in our community, be they civic or governance laws and things, but we also want to put laws into our own lives. And it's difficult because I want it, and I want to then become somewhat judgmental when you break the laws that I have placed in as safeguards for my testimony. For instance, I mean, some of the big ones, drinking. We know the Bible condemns drunkenness. But yet also, we know that liberty says all things are permissible because I'm not judged based on my obedience. Because if I'm judged based on my obedience, I am condemned. My faith is counted for righteousness, not my obedience. So, hey, is drinking all right? Is drunkenness understood? I mean, it's a sin, yes, and we can't get away from that, and we don't want to get away from that. But hey, is it still permissible yet not beneficial? And all these questions. So should I personally put in I do not drink. But I want to extend that to everybody. Everybody should not drink, because drinking, even the Bible tells us, it gets us into problems. It's a viper ready to poison your life. It's a snare ready to trap you. Or swearing, use of the tongue. James is very clear. Blessing and cursing cannot proceed from the same fountain or the same tongue. We are in the spirit. We are to be full of love, joy, peace, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance, all of those. But swearing it comes from the heart and it brings forth vile emotions. It doesn't bring forth peace and gentleness and love. It brings forth anger or frustration or rebellion. And so you ask yourself, hey, what is my standard? My standard is no swearing. When I hear someone swear or when I hear someone take the name of the Lord in vain, I cringe. They should not be doing that, and they shouldn't. But it's not a law in that I can't go out there enforcing the law. It's a standard that's good for me. God blesses me when I kind of set some standards up that help me walk in the Spirit, but it's an internal matter. You can regulate that a person not swear by putting rules in place, but you can't change their heart from one of bitterness or angerness or rebellion to one of joy and peace and gentleness and love. That's a work of the Spirit, not the law, not rules, all of those things. Think of the Sabbath. And we always kind of question ourselves, well, what is permissible? Our society used to not shop on the Sabbath. The Jews, of course, don't shop on the Sabbath. We were doing our Bible study last week in Nehemiah, and of course, Nehemiah shuts the gates because the Gentiles were coming in to sell fish and other things to the Jews on the Sabbath, and he shut the gates, and they stayed outside. And he says, you stay outside again, I'm going to deal with you. You will not be dealing business on the Sabbath. And so you think, well, are we violating the Sabbath? And of course, then there's the legalistic sense of Saturday versus Sunday, Saturday being the Sabbath, Sunday being the day that the Christians chose to kind of differentiate themselves. But the spiritual concept of the Sabbath, and Jesus tells us that the Sabbath, man was not made for the Sabbath, but the Sabbath was made for man. It's supposed to be something good for us, something that refreshes us, that rests us, that we set a day aside. So the spiritual concept is set a day aside to be refreshed in God, to get the world's taint off kind of thing and spend some times with Him. So we should be looking forward to going to church, to spending some time, not just an hour, but that day should be one. And but we have liberty. The Jews would add ridiculous rules about the Sabbath, and so all of a sudden they become slaves to it because, hey, you can't turn a light switch on, or you can't do this, or you can't move this, you can't walk this far, you can't lift this much burden, that was never the intent. The intent was just not be encumbered with other responsibilities during the Sabbath or other distractions. Take it for God and rejoice in it. And so you can't legislate those things. You can make a person go to church, but you can't make them rejoice when they're singing to the Lord. That's something the Spirit does as you connect with God and you see that God is working in and through your life. And so I guess I don't have the answers to it, but what I've come to, and I can see it in others more than myself because we all have blinders on, but I'm trying to grow in the idea of standards over rules or laws. Rules are something you want to enforce on others. Standards are something you want to put in place for your own life. What is good to keep me out of foolish areas? Like the Proverbs is full of things that, hey, put this in your life and you will not be like a fool. Put the wrong thing in your life and you will reap what you sow. You'll reap the rewards of foolish behavior, and so you'll have consequences. And so we can look at other people's lives and say, well, that's happening because of something or other. And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. We could be Job's counselors kind of falsely accusing them, or maybe there could be some truth in it. But I want to encourage us as we grow. First, we're hard charging to correct the world. Hey, everybody else has got Christianity wrong, and they're not holding to firm standards or doctrines. And rather than, hey, let the Spirit work on me, and then let my testimony flow to me. What is good in my testimony should flow out and should almost infect others in a positive way. So am I a person of liberty or of law. When people look at me, they're a person who wants to correct the people or really wants the best for people. And so, how hard do you come down on others who are not living their faith as you think they should? And you may have warrant to say the Bible is clear on this, and it is clear. And I'm not suggesting that we compromise any of it, but it's kind of, are we that policeman enforcer, or are we that person like Jesus who neither do I condemn you? Go and sin no more. Am I known as a person of grace or a person with a harsh edge? Is the Bible truly able to divide, asunder, discern between the thoughts and intents of the heart, or the divide between the marrow and the joints? Or is it a club that I beat people over the head with? Is it transforming me, or am I using it to point out other people's failures? And so it's a transitional thing. And as you grow, like I say, this is something, it's much too big for a 12, 13-minute video. But just to introduce it, keep thinking down these things. What do I want to be made known of? I'll leave you just with a thought from 1 Corinthians, which talks about love. And of course, sometimes we think love and truth are certainly hand in hand. But love, it suffers. Verse 4, charity or love suffers long and is kind. It does not envy or envieth not. It does not vaunt itself. It's not puffed up. It does not behave itself unseemly. Does not seek her own. Is not easily provoked. Thinketh no evil. Rejoiceth not in iniquity, but rejoiceth in the truth. The truth and love do go hand in hand, but it's that wisdom to know I need to apply it to my life, but can I force it on another person's life? Is that the way to grow them in faith? We want to be obedient, but it's not by pushing obedience. It's by promoting the fruit of the Spirit that obedience is unlocked in us when we see God's Spirit working in our lives. Anyway, enough of that. Unfortunately, as far a couple of questions, just administrative questions, people have asked from last week, how is the kitchen floor? It's pretty good. It doesn't look any different. We've had dryers on it for a good portion of a week, and it's all dried up and everything looks good. I don't know if the water got up into the walls or, between the kitchen and the utility room. But the floor looks good. The cabinets, they look okay from a distance and they still function. They're just that some of the laminate has lifted in a couple areas on a couple of drawers. It doesn't need to be addressed right away. So, but yeah, no, that was a bad mistake. A couple other things. I was hoping we were going to be able to meet by the May long weekend. Well, stage 1 of restriction lifting is starting in a couple provinces, but not yet BC, and it's not quite happening as fast as I wanted, and meetings of more than 10 to 15 probably aren't going to happen for in stage 1 and may not happen in stage 2, so it may be a while. And even when they happen, I thought, well, we should have our bocce tournament and fellowship outside and have a barbecue or something, but it sounds like food and fellowship type activities aren't even going to be part of the first stage of allowing assemblies. You're going to have to sit in separate pews and be distant and refrain from shaking hands and contact. So there's not really going to be that fellowship aspect when we first meet. So we're going to have to wait until they open the doors of this slowly. But I was hoping we could do a little more than we're going to be able to do. Maybe by the end of May we'll have church service, but they're saying even when church service starts, they may not want you to be in Sunday schools or things where children were going to be interacting. So we may have to tailor it a little bit more sterile for the first while. But anyway, Lord bless you. We'll be back with the next installment of a message for Sunday morning. Oh, and by the way, if you've looked, I posted a small snippet from the McPhail Fosseys. That was a technical glitch. They sent us a video or a link for a video of an update of their ministry because they're not able to be with us in May. But for some reason, only 4 minutes of it posted. It hooks up on me when I'm trying to download it. So
I will keep trying, and hopefully we'll have that full one up for Sunday as well. So you have a whole lot of options for videos to view, to be encouraged in the Word. But God bless you all, and we'll see you again soon.